There is a massive overhaul to how add-ons work coming this week with Midnight Prepatch. Blizzard's communication on the matter has been unclear. What is actually happening with add-ons is that a lot of the functionalities they provided are still possible, but the way that they must access information requires full reworks of their code to use different functions. Many add-ons that were made ages ago and are only currently maintained by authors who have quit WoW or are no longer so invested in WoW are being discontinued rather than being fully rewritten. A lot of add-ons are already updated and fully functional with your profiles from War Within persisting. There are a few add-ons though that are in the process of being rewritten and will not be out for pre-patch, but they will be out for midnight release. In this video, I'm going to go through each category of add-on and talk about what's happening to the most popular add-ons of that category. Most of the footage you'll see here is me being logged into the PTR for pre-patch, and I'm going to try to recreate my live UI one add-on at a time. As always, when messing with add-ons, it is probably a good idea to back up your WTF folder. This folder contains profiles and settings for your add-ons, so if something breaks on pre-patch release, maybe you can salvage it. So I will start with talking about weak auras. The weak auras add-on is not being maintained for Midnight because it would be a mountain of unpaid work for its devs to change every single function it uses, and it is totally justified that they are not working on it anymore. But it is not as bad as it seems. Most things that people use weak auras for are still possible and are being developed into fully fledged add-ons. It is a common concern that you will have to download 20 add-ons to replace one, but I have managed to get that number down to 4 UI element add-ons and 6 minor quality of life add-ons, which I don't think is really that much of a deal. So to replace weak auras, we have to understand what it actually is. Weak auras is a framework for code to be ran in one centralized add-on with a nice interface. I would say there are 3 main functions people use weak auras for. I would classify it into class weak auras, encounter weak auras, and quality of life weak auras. Now, class weak auras have been replaced with the Cooldown Manager, and there are a few brand new add-ons to modify the Cooldown Manager with a lot of freedom. The Cooldown Manager is a new UI element where Blizzard gives you a panel containing all of your spells and all buffs associated with those spells. I recommend going into the settings and giving it a keybind under Toggle Cooldown Settings. The Cooldown Manager has actually grown on me a bit. I think it is an easy and quick thing to set up. There is a big concern that some spells and abilities are still missing from it though. But I would say the base Cooldown Manager is lacking. You only have 3 total groups and you can't edit individual icons unless you use an add-on. I think the premier add-on in this category is ArcUI. With ArcUI, you can mimic almost any function of class weak auras and clusters. I will quickly go over how to use ArcUI. In the Groups tab, you can access the 3 original groups of the Cooldown Manager and also make your own groups. For example, here I have made a 4th group that is meant to contain my defensive buffs. In these groups, you can control the size and spacing of the icons. Then through the Defaults tab, there are a myriad of options you can set which will apply to every icon in every group. And in the CDM Icons tab, you can choose individual icons to apply different settings to. These settings include aspect ratio, zoom, you can add a glow to things off cooldown, make missing buffs red, you can remove the GCD swipe, you can also remove Blizzard's new yellow activation swipe, you can also just fully change the color and format of the cooldown text, stack text, and proc glows, and more. You can also just freeform move any icons, like here I have my interrupt off to the side in its own position and my Tempest buff is glowing while my Ascendance buff is not. The Arc Auras tab allows you to track trinkets and potions, and in a future update, any spell by spell ID. ArcUI also allows bars to be made in the Bars tab. To make a bar, you first have to track the spell in the Cooldown Manager. Say I wanted a Maelstrom weapon bar, I would grab it here and then make a stack bar. I have to input the max stacks and these settings here manually, and I can hide the icon from the Cooldown Manager so you only see the bar. I would then press edit on that bar, taking me to the Appearance tab where I can change a lot of different aspects. Here I will resize the bar a bit. I'll change the color and then also add a conditional to further change the color above 5 and another conditional to change the color at the max value of 10. I will remove the tick marks and I'll make the stack count centered inside the bar. And here I have a pretty nice looking Maelstrom bar akin to a weak aura. You can also take something with duration like flame shock duration on your target and make a bar to display that duration. If you like to display cooldowns as bars, something that's pretty common for Fire Mage, then this add-on also has a function for that. And if you only want to use this add-on for bars and not the Cooldown Manager, you can also just disable the Cooldown Manager aspect. This add-on has profiles that you can use between different classes and an import-export feature. I have been working a bit with the dev of ArcUI and I do think it is the most advanced Cooldown Manager add-on right now that maintains most functionalities of class weak auras. If you want a Cooldown Manager add-on that is a bit simpler, you can get Tweaks UI Cooldowns, which is a more straightforward add-on to reskin and reposition elements of the Cooldown Manager without some of the advanced capabilities of ArcUI. The second aspect covered by combat weak auras is the resource bar. ArcUI does plan to add resource bars by midnight release, but not by pre-patch. There is another add-on called Sensei's resource bar that covers resource for every class except for Enhancement Shaman. You can get to its settings through edit mode. For the mana bar, you probably want to hide mana on rolled DPS. And in this settings menu, you can change the size of the bar, the texture, the text, and color. And if you are someone that doesn't want to set things up themselves and you just want to take a profile and play, Luxthos has made full edit mode and Cooldown Manager profiles that you can import with a click of a button. All the info you need for that is on luxthos.com. Now moving on to unit frame add-ons. Shadowed unit frames is no longer being updated, so if you use that, you need a swap. I think the best unit frame add-on right now is Unhalted unit frames. It has a pretty user-friendly settings menu with individual settings for each frame that are nice and neatly categorized. This add-on covers player frames, target frames, focus frames, and boss frames. I can go into the player frame here, change its size and position, I can show overabsorbs, and I can change the text through these tags, and more. I also found a lot of success using Unhalted as a cast bar add-on. I just took the cast bars away from the frames and moved their position to be central in the screen. A nice little hack you can do with cast bars in Midnight is to use the target cast bar as a mechanic timer bar. A lot of bosses will cast their mechanics and the target cast bar would kind of act like a counter mechanic weak aura that would tell you with a bar when the mechanic is coming. Now I couldn't find an actual complete cast bar add-on that's dedicated for the cast bar. Quartz is tentative on being updated for Midnight. Now this add-on doesn't cover raid frames, which are quite controversial. A lot of functions previously used are not available. You cannot filter buffs or debuffs, you cannot put specific buffs in specific positions, you also cannot reorder buffs. Blizzard has begun to add their own reordering, like for Preservoker it always puts Reversion first and Echo second, but their reordering is very incomplete. But you can still change the appearance of the frames. Cell is being updated for Midnight, but it is not ready for pre-patch, so you might need to use a different add-on in the meantime. Dander's frames has been the standard raid frame add-on in beta. It has a lot of customizations on every aspect and overlay on raid frames. I played with it for a bit and I made a profile pretty similar to the default frames. Grid 2 has also been updated for pre-patch. And for nameplates, we still have Plater. Some in-depth scripts on Plater will no longer work, such as highlighting mobs with dots on them, but the full appearance and majority of functions are still possible. Here, I just took my profile from live and imported it. It works pretty well. There is a new methodology for coloring NPCs. You can no longer color by unit ID, but you can color by criteria decided by Blizzard, such as elite status, level 91 mobs, and mobs that are casters. Blizzard is actually surprisingly consistent at categorizing mobs. You can find these colors in the colors/threat tab. Another thing that is still possible is an enemy cast bar can be colored differently if your interrupt is on cooldown or not. The Jundi's Plater profile is also something that has been updated with a pre-patch version that has all these features in it. Also, a new add-on that came out with beta is Platynator. It is from the same dev as Auctionator and Baginator, and in my opinion, it has a very nice user-friendly UI. For damage meters, Details is continuing development and it has a version for pre-patch, but it is not the same as old Details. Blizzard has fully restricted the information that Details used to use, and now Details goes off of what is provided through the Blizzard damage meter. I did have complaints in the past about inaccuracies, but I think the Blizzard damage meter is reasonably accurate now and their info is usable as a damage meter. They have not yet implemented enemy damage taken. They have implemented deaths, but I think the death meter has not been patched into pre-patch, only in beta. So Details is usable and the profiles and settings persist from your live profile, but it is merely a visual skin of the Blizzard damage meter. Action bar add-ons are essentially unchanged. I used Bartender on live and I logged into PTR with an updated Bartender and everything looked the same. Dominos has also been updated. Also technically an action bar add-on is OPie, which is still usable, however you might not be able to see the cooldowns on the OPie wheel in combat. Now for boss timers, what Blizzard has done is implemented their own version of Bigwigs. They went with the timeline style for their default and the boss alerts are given through Blizzard's criteria. If you prefer the bars over the timeline, Bigwigs and DBMs still work. I've also heard that these add-ons can send custom timers, so it is probably worth getting one of them. If you like the timeline but want the old one, that was the raid ability timeline we saw previously, there is an add-on called Better Timeline that preserves the visual style of that. Reminders are still possible, and Blizzard will probably never be able to stop reminders. The Northern Sky Raid Tools add-on has a reminder function through Note, and also some potential features coming for the first Midnight raids. I wouldn't worry too much about this yet though. I expect the technology for raid add-ons to rapidly develop around Midnight release, although they will most likely not be able to be at the same level of computational power. Method raid tools is still going to be a mandatory add-on if you are raiding. Most of its functions, including the note, are staying. With MRT, you can still make a combat timer and a BRES cooldown tracker as well. And there are also a lot of other miscellaneous UI elements that used to be weak auras and now need to be independent add-ons. For an MPlusTimer, Relo has released his timer as an add-on called MPlusTimer. It is basically exactly like the weak aura version. Targeted spells are still possible in Midnight. It is a little bit more of a workaround, but the add-on that is called TargetedSpells puts an icon on the raid frame of people who are targeted. It also puts an icon in the middle of the screen, much like the weak aura did. If you want sound on this target spell, there is actually a Blizzard accessibility feature that does TTS when you are targeted. It is in the settings under Audio Assist, Save Targeted. I had a lot of quality of life weak auras before. I found the add-on EnhanceQoL that has a long list of small and big quality of life things such as auto setting an auction house filter for current expansion only, changing the way links are displayed in the chat window, muting specific annoying sounds, and much more. This add-on is so detailed. It also has a working spell history tracker. I went through the rest of my weak auras and found a few non-combat weak auras that were not covered by this add-on, and I found some add-ons here to replace them. And there are a lot of add-ons that are unchanged. Any add-on that has its primary function outside of combat will stay the same. Open world add-ons like TomTom or Plumber should still work, and raid management add-ons like RC Loot Council will also work. Note that these add-ons might slightly break during combat. Not all add-ons will be usable upon pre-patch. Blizzard is blocking any add-on that has not had a designated 12.0 release, meaning some add-ons that are no longer being maintained will not be able to run in-game without an update. And some add-ons will not work at all. Omni CD is pretty much entirely blocked as far as I'm aware, and also scrolling damage checks add-ons will be limited to changing size and font only. Now for anyone who uses ElvUI, the good news is that ElvUI is coming out with a midnight version. The bad news is that it is not ready for pre-patch. So if you are an ElvUI user planning to play in pre-patch, you will have to use some temporary solutions. There are a number of new full UI add-ons that have come up. There is Tweaks UI, Vel UI, and Nef UI. I won't go too into detail into these though. So here is what my live UI looks like right now hitting the dummies, and after all of this, here is what my pre-patch UI looks like. I didn't try to make it exactly the same. I probably could if I wanted to, but most aspects of the UI are preserved, and most of it was just done with profiles I already had on add-ons I already had. Now there has been a lot of discourse recently and criticism of how add-ons still seem as powerful as they were. People always cite the competitive advantage paragraph, but in my eyes this paragraph was mainly referring to things like DBM, which was an entire UI element that had no parity in the base game. Something like colored nameplates is very inoffensive compared to an entire add-on that had 582 million downloads. And honestly, I think at this point add-ons are mainly for reskinning or repositioning things. The only add-ons in this entire list that I think are truly mandatory to download are things like method raid tools if you're a mythic raider. And I think that some things being moved from weak auras into add-ons could actually be a good thing, because instead of having major UI elements that are buried in a weak auras menu, I can have everything in the same place in CurseForge. I'll put the list here again for 10 seconds.